There's nothing like the great outdoors, the crisp fresh air, vast open space, picture-perfect scenery, and wildlife in abundance. What's not to like? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot thanks to the horror genre. The following 10 horror films all differ in their approach to implementing their respective horror and terrain, but are joined at the hip in that they make the most of their open-air surroundings. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movies to watch if you love the outdoors. Number 10, Backcountry. Nothing is scarier than realism, which is precisely why Hollywood keeps pumping out animal attack movies. Wolves, sharks, and crocodiles are your usual culprits, but when you find yourself deep in the Canadian woods, there's only one culprit you're likely to cross paths with: bears. That's where 2014's Backcountry comes into play. Loosely based on the true story of a black bear attack that occurred a decade earlier, writer and director Adam McDonald aimed to encapsulate and exhibit the same horrors of the real-life couple that they would have experienced. Nature and survival horrors go hand in hand, and Backcountry is a solid entry. It's hard not to get enamored with the magnificent scenery while there's a bloodthirsty killer bear on the loose, but there are some genuinely great shots in this. The realism conveyed by the film's use of shaky cameras can sometimes be disorienting, but overall this is a good horror that doesn't rely on cheap tricks and jump scares to get under your skin. Backcountry is a thrilling watch that thrusts the viewer into a truly terrifying real-life situation, especially for its bear attack scene, which gives The Revenant a good run for its money. Number 9, Blackwater. Australia is undoubtedly one of the most visually stunning countries in the world. It's unique for many reasons, but none more so than its natural beauty everywhere you look. Whether it's the glorious Gold Coast or the vast outback, you're in for a visual feast when you go. However, accompanying said beauty is a host of carnivorous creatures and creepy crawlies at every turn, especially prevalent within northern Australia's mangrove swamps. And said swamps happen to be infested with crocodiles, which is where we find 2007's Blackwater. The film is based on actual events that preceded 4 years before its release. You may be disappointed if you're a fan of creature-centric horrors where the animal embarks on a bloodthirsty killing spree, though this is a hidden gem worth checking out. Blackwater opts to take viewers down a path of paranoia as opposed to gore, as scares are swapped out for suspense, where fear is generated from what you don't see compared to what you do. The film also benefits from some great acting from resident Aussie actors and the real crocodile, rather than an animatronic or computer-generated one. Looking to watch a solid and suspenseful killer croc flick? If yes, then this is the one you want to see. Number 8, In a Violent Nature. It's pretty astounding how many horror movies are set in the woods. Still, it does make a lot of sense, considering they're the ideal environment for masked murderers and axe-wielding whack jobs to inhabit. They're dark, quiet, and spacious, making them the perfect playground for cat-and-mouse horrors, especially slashers. With that in mind, In a Violent Nature is another chapter in this ever-growing book. However, there's a twist. Audiences and critics alike have become accustomed to these kinds of films following the hunted rather than the hunter, but Chris Nash's flick flips that on its head and tells the tale from the perspective of the slasher rather than the slashed. There's much there for horror fans to like, especially using practical effects to encapsulate and exhibit the film's excessive gore. But don't get it twisted, In a Violent Nature is exceptionally bloody and equally brutal, making it a fun watch. However, it takes a while to get there and a lot of walking. If you're planning a trip to the woods soon and worry about encountering In a Violent Nature's Johnny, a brisk walk or a slow jog should be enough to escape his clutches. Come to think of it, maybe it's best to run, just to be extra safe. Number 7, Frozen. Beware, Frozen will unlock a new fear for you. Often confused with the beloved snow-set Disney movie of the same name, this particular Frozen is a little hidden gem that will have your skin crawling whilst perched on the edge of your seat. Frozen has a simple but terrifying premise. The film stars Shawn Ashmore of X-Men and The Boys notoriety alongside Emma Bell and Kevin Zegers as 3 skiers stranded and trapped in a chairlift who must decide how to save themselves from impending death by hypothermia. Survival horrors are often hit and miss, usually falling into the latter category. Yet this one is surprisingly pretty good. Not only are the characters cramped and confined on screen, but also the viewer off screen. Director Adam Green uses close-ups and narrow shots to ensure our attention never drifts from them. For most of the film, Green's direction solely focuses on the 3 friends in the frame. Time passes as the frost consumes their faces through rosy cheeks and chapped lips, and gore lovers will be pleased to know that Frozen doesn't shy away in parts. This is especially prevalent when a pack of rather hungry wolves arrives on the scene. For those who still intend to ski after seeing this, kudos! Number 6, A Lonely Place to Die. A Lonely Place to Die follows a group of mountaineering friends who, whilst trekking through the Scottish Highlands, uncover a kidnapped young girl and are subsequently chased and hunted by her captors. The film, directed by Julian Gilby of Rise of the Foot Soldier, gets off to a flying start. The talented ensemble includes Melissa George, who stands out and delivers an excellent performance as our primary protagonist, Alison. It must be said, however, that where there is a hero, there is always a villain, and the ever-brilliant Sean Harris plays the merciless and money-hungry Mr. Kidd. The landscapes and scenery at hand don't go to waste, as the cinematography is gorgeous for the most part. As for the action, the stakes feel real for the characters on screen, but when a film throws so much at you so fast, it can fizzle out very quickly, and A Lonely Place to Die suffers a little from this due to its shift in scenery. The only frustrating aspect of A Lonely Place to Die is that it could be even better than it already is, as the picture's departure from the wilderness trades its horror survival feel for more of an action film. There's plenty to like here, and Melissa George might just be the pick of the bunch, as she often is. Number 5. Speak No Evil. It's incredibly common for English language remakes to fall flat at the first hurdle. However, James Watkins' interpretation of the original Danish-Dutch-English film breaks the norm. It delivers a devilishly wicked reimagining that honours its predecessor whilst being an entirely separate entity at points, especially during the film's finale. Speak No Evil features a fantastic cast, including Mackenzie Davis, Scoot McNairy, Aisling Franciosi, and youngsters Alex West Leffler and Dan Hoff. That said, one man steals the show, as he often does: James McAvoy. James McAvoy has enjoyed a fine career to date, and although his versatility may be his biggest strength, he has a real hack for nailing horror. You can tell he had a blast playing the psychotic Paddy. He's obnoxious and equally narcissistic, and McAvoy brings the perfect concoction of charm and chills needed to the role. Make no mistake, this sometimes makes for a very unsettling and uncomfortable watch. Speak No Evil doesn't shy away from jump scares, but it mainly pours all of its eggs into its suspense basket, and apart from McAvoy's performance, this is where the film shines. Although the suspense is ideally paid off by an incredibly satisfying conclusion that will have you cheering and clapping, the film's finale is reasonably watered down from its predecessors. It's funny, grisly, and downright disturbing at points, but it's a horror well worth watching. After all, there are plenty of worse places to go for little couples therapy than the English countryside. Number 4. Open Water. Although horror hides in the woods, it hides underwater too. Oceans are dark and deadly, and the dreaded fear of not knowing what resides underneath the surface is what makes seaset horrors so damn terrifying. 2003's Open Water is no exception. Like the other entries on this list, Open Water is loosely based on the actual events of a couple left behind on a scuba diving trip who fight to survive whilst fending off a shiver of sharks. The movie has a documentary style, unlike the bulk shark-centered horrors that have preceded or succeeded it. If you harness your expectations, the film perfectly emulates the real-life terror of the situation. For example, this is not Jaws. There's no trademark Steven Spielberg direction or iconic John Williams score. More Open Water is a condensed and compact concoction of terror and tragedy on a much smaller scale. Horrors don't often make you feel for the characters due to the genre's general over-reliance on dumbed-down individuals who commit calamity after calamity. Yet, Open Water's personal and intimate approach has you genuinely feel sorry for its protagonists. It may not be perfect, but it's a solid shark flick in a world where more sink than swim. Number 3. The Ritual. Why is it so difficult for people to just, stick to a path? You'd think that would be rule number 1 to follow in a hiker's guidebook, but not when it comes to horror, especially if it's a good one, like 2017's The Ritual. Following a tragedy, a group of university chums embarks on a hiking trip to Sweden to honour their late friend's death, only to find themselves being stalked and subsequently hunted by someone or something that lurks in the woods. Rafe Spall steals the show here as the guilt-stricken Luke, who blames himself for the death that leaves a cloud of tension hanging over the group. Spall and his cohort's conversations feel equally believable and realistic, which can often not be the case in these types of horrors. The Ritual is a brilliant yet chilling watch. It is incredibly creepy at times as director David Bruckner ramps up the fear factor through the ominous ambience of branches breaking, creaking trees, and howling winds. Breathtaking cinematography and visuals are accompanied by an ever-looming and unsettling presence that follows the 4 friends down the rabbit hole of death and despair. Lads' holidays are always a nightmare to organise the best of times, so if you had hiking in Sweden on the list, might want to give that one a miss. Number 2. Eden Lake. To be clear, this one is full of doom and gloom. Having already appeared on this list, director James Watkins is back in the hot seat again, this time for his 2008 flick Eden Lake. This is a horror well worth checking out, if you have the stomach to sit through it. Although relatively short in its runtime, Eden Lake packs the punch that some within the genre couldn't deliver even with an extra hour. The plot is simple yet sinister, enough to capture your attention, as Kelly Riley and Michael Fassbender star as a couple whose romantic getaway is interrupted by Jack O'Connell's gang of hoodlums and miscreants. Eden Lake is an unpleasant watch. It's brutal, cruel, disturbing, and horrifying, and honestly, there aren't enough adjectives in the dictionary to describe just how grim this film is. Similarly to Speak No Evil, Watkins generates an uneasy feeling from the get-go, building a tense and suspenseful slow burn until O'Connell's explosive introduction. Great performances are aplenty in this, but the Skins star puts on one hell of a show as the sick and twisted Brett, who represents the epitome of evil and will belittle, beat, and butcher anyone in his way, if it weren't for those meddling kids. Number 1. The Witch. It was inevitable, and therefore understandable, that most of the entries on this list would feature the woods, seeing as they are the home of horror. However, few can transport you back through time to 16th century New England quite like The Witch can. Robert Eggers has proved time and time again why he is the master of period pieces. Through his articulate aesthetic and distinct direction, he has taken us to the late 19th century to watch two lighthouse keepers subsequently lose their minds in 2019's The Lighthouse, the turn of the 10th century to witness a revenge-fueled Alexander Skarsgård wreak havoc as a Viking in 2022's The Northman, and as of 2024, eventually back to the 19th century for his admitted passion project, Nosferatu. The Witch delivers gut-wrenching tension that may give you heart palpitations at times. It's atmospheric and claustrophobic, as you can't help but feel part of the scene with how Eggers directs. The film features a spellbinding, star-in-the-making performance from a young Anya Taylor-Joy, as well as the ever-reliable duo of Ralph Ineson and Kate Dickie, who portray a deeply religious family banished from their communal settlement and left to fend for themselves as unspeakable and unfathomable evil tears their family apart. And what might that evil be? Yep, you guessed it, witches. The Salem witch trials heavily influenced Eggers' screenplay, and he and his actors truly conveyed the fear and terror that swept communities like those featured in the film at the time. Remember, there is evil in the wood.